Hey, y'all. Excited to talk through my newest presentation on data-driven lessons from 12 plus years of doing content-led SEO. Gave this talk at Chiang SEO and also Brighton SEO in San Diego and Thailand, respectively. Got some pretty solid feedback, so I'm excited to bring it to you here on YouTube or wherever you may see a clip of this. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk through comes from the context of who we work with. So I want to share this first, not to just show some cool logos, but give context that we generally work with either high growth startups or medium to large size businesses. We're not really working on the local side, and a lot of these content approaches may not be as applicable there. But we've been doing it for quite a long time. And the idea behind this talk is to share when content and outcomes have ever gone flat, what we did to kind of get out of that, and what generally we've iterated on over the years to get to the place we are now from an outcome and a performance and a strategy point of view. So kind of bucketing into four different areas: content strategy, keyword research, content creation, and content distribution, each with their own takeaways and thought processes around it. Content strategy, we're more specifically speaking to user experience and internal linking, and some of our kind of iterative lessons there. The first piece of that is around sticky navs. So we kind of pattern matched what we found as kind of higher performing websites out there, and came to the conclusion that really some of the highest performers tended to have this sticky nav experience, also with a contrasting call to action. Nothing that's like in your face alarming, but on brand, draws the eye. And we tested this for ourselves and actually saw a 39% lift in goal conversions, and also an increase in time on site metrics, which directly leads to SEO lift. And we did see SEO lift as well. And when we say 39%, also want to state, we're not saying our leads went up 39%. This also related to visits to case study pages and service pages, which are also our goal conversions on the site, given we have long sales cycles as a company generally. But overall, very clear win, especially in B2B spaces. I think it's even more obvious to do something like this, but it makes sense intuitively because it's a non-obtrusive way to keep people in that shopping experience. Immediately gives them somewhere to go without some other thing being force-fed to them. And in general, it is going to be a positive thing to have the core content nav inherit the main nav. This is another recommendation. It's not present in the text here, but is important. We do see a lot of blogs that simply do not use the main navigation, and that's not great because it's very difficult to get to that main experience, which is what you want to do to drive conversions. But also from an SEO standpoint, it's going to drive a lot of link equity because a blog is going to generate a lot of links because it's more top funnel. So you want to drive that equity via those top nav experiences to your more important sales pages. So if that's not present and it's just blog categories, that's not great experience for doing that. And is often why we'll hear links don't do as much. You'll check those benchmarks and they're just often disconnected in some way. Another change we made over time was smaller hero images. So we tested the before and after on Siege, where we had a big hero image like this and a pop of color, and we iterated to a smaller hero image, such as the right version here, and saw a time on site lift of around 7.62%. Our thought process was, previously, we're a big design company, we care about design. Maybe that big pop of color, a big image would make sense and keep people on site. And maybe it did, but load time was not ideal. The idea of getting people into the content became more a priority as years went on, and it clearly was more important than we had previously thought, because an image can be kind of superfluous, not exactly the most important thing to a site design. Even in our case, I don't think it adds a lot of value. It's just kind of our inherited aesthetic that we have yet to kind of iterate on, and it hasn't been there in the world. But in our case, we want to get them to the content quickly. You see that content above the fold in our situation, and I think that's helping load time. We're in tech, so it's probably not a huge deal, but if you're not in tech, it's an even bigger deal because you probably have more customers not in high internet zones, also on mobile. And it's also worth noting in this deck, I show a lot of desktop experiences. Our tests are looking at desktop plus mobile. A lot of our tests, just because we controlled it and we're able to run it very easily, some of them happen on Siege, and we have a desktop primary audience, so that's why we kind of show that. SaaS also tends to be that. But I think all these recommendations generally do work on mobile, but it's worth noting on mobile, generally it's a load time thing. Showing a smaller image, the experience didn't change that much, but overall, equated to a net lift of 7.62% for us specifically. And this is also best practice we're kind of globally rolling out, because I think it makes sense no matter what industry. The size of the lift may vary based on the importance of this kind of thing in internet and internet speeds. As noted, I think generally dovetailing from engagement scores are traffic lift from that. And similarly, whether it's correlation or causation, we saw a 10% lift 60 days post change on our site. Another tweak we made, pattern matching the highest performing websites online, is the fact that our kind of go-to boilerplate 3 post content related links view was not the right one. We upped that to 6+. And just for clarity, that's like on a blog post, and I'm about to show an example, and I can jump to it and jump back. On the Siege blog, we used to have just the top. Now we added the bottom row, or vice versa, however you want to define it, post content that now gets to 6 related links. And you can see the kind of engagement difference post implementation of this. Organic traffic also saw a pretty massive lift. It's worth noting there was a pretty big update around the same time. So correlation, causation, I don't think it's causation in this situation, but maybe it's representative of even 10% of that lift. That's still a major win, something you want to do, especially for something that may not be a lot of overall lift in terms of dev bandwidth to implement. And why we think this is the case is just an intuitive UX thing, and it also has SEO benefit as a kind of dovetail from that. Is when you can make that content curated, and this is important, you can't just show 3 random posts, but if you have a good amount of content and it's hyper relevant, why wouldn't you service that? So if we're on a SaaS article, and if we do have 3 other SaaS articles that we could have displayed, but we did not, that's potentially detriment to time on site, to additional clicks, to additional relevancy that users might have found if we had displayed that content. So I think that's why this works, is when companies are investing so strongly in content, giving more results is only going to further help with that effort occurring. So that's the important part. Make sure you have a curated view here. And I think that's why it drives the results it does. And if it doesn't have that curated view, I don't think it's going to do as well. And that's a user experience side, but the internal linking is just surface more content closer to the homepage, like narrow your overall click depth. That's going to have positive effects. And I think that's why this matters as well. So we set that 6 post content related link benchmark, but I think it could be even more than that as well. It's all about just what the thumbnails feel like, what feels right for your company. Should you even show thumbnails? In our case, we do, just because it kind of fits the design. But for some companies, it does not make sense to do that. Also, you maybe have a mobile first audience where a lot of thumbnails will drag performance. In that case, you might be able to even get even more links than this. That may be a cost of click-through rate of some of those links. So you have to weigh all those things. But our new recommendation is essentially 6+. It's like, what is the fit? But no matter what, 6, and at least consider more. And if you have amazing thumbnail design because it makes sense for your brand, maybe you want to do even more. But if you don't really have that, maybe it's going to feel sloppy. And if that's the case, we maybe don't want to do that because it's going to potentially hurt user experience because it feels sloppy and SEO to do that. But I think 6 generally is a non-sloppy level as long as it's curated as we show here. Something else we pulled out recently is blog engagement benchmarks. We looked across our client history and aggregated the engagement times. And what I think this is helpful for is essentially benchmarking yourself. So if you're looking at this, I encourage just going to look at your own companies, see how you compare. It's interesting also looking at the industry differences. It makes sense in health markets. You're going to care deeply about your life. So you're likely to stay on page longer. And that probably is a good connection to the whole your money or your life idea and why content is so important, and the writer and the editor being so important in that market, because people are kind of looking through that with a fine-tooth comb and are more likely to be judging that. Compare that to maybe a lighter-hearted consumer vertical. You may have low time on site, but that doesn't mean you're a bad experience. And that's why it's kind of an important dichotomy there to understand where you're at and who you compare to, because you may not actually be as bad as you think you are for that reason. Some other random things we saw here: seniors had high time on site engagement. I think that's kind of a persona thing, which is interesting, and it's not represented in his data benchmarks, but I think was overall worth noting. As just an overall look at a high engagement experience, this one for Nexiva, I think checks a lot of boxes. I did kind of cut off the GIF in sharing this, but they get into the content quickly. There's rich media. They have a lot of custom CSS features that look nice. There's video. Design is high quality. Another thing that was specific to them that stood out looking across all similar situations is that it's an encompassing experience. So something that kind of triggered for me, and it could be incorrect, could be correct, is that there isn't a lot of white space going on here. And I think that feeling of like I'm in it somehow makes you a little more engaged on average. That's just my hypothesis. I haven't been able to purely A/B test that, but in looking at the highest of the high, felt this similarity. So there could be something there. There might not. Maybe it somewhat connects and there's other things going on, but I thought it was at least worth sharing what a high performing experience tends to look like. Another view is just getting more priority to content sections in the internal links. We pattern matched high performance, and something we noticed on bigger websites and bigger companies, we have a lot of nice logos that we've worked with. Sometimes that doesn't always connect to performance. And what we found is that those that perform poorly were very often pointing less than 2% to their content section. They may have one blog link in the footer, but no visibility in the top nav. When it is in the top nav, it's buried. There aren't additional links to the content at all on the homepage or in the navigations. That will often both not pass internal link equity, but more importantly, not pass visibility. And if we're not making our content visible to users, how can we expect it to perform well from an SEO standpoint? So we kind of went with this overall benchmark. We also have a nice case study of essentially implementing it where there's a pretty massive lift. Again, could be partially causative, correlative, hard to say, but definitely is very clear that there was some kind of positive impact adding a good amount of internal links. Kraken, I think, is a pretty good example of this. Their Learn Top Nav link directly brings you there. You can imagine how people will click that, and it's not just in a drop down of resources in there with a lot of other ebooks and things of that nature. And then in the bottom right, they're also pushing to the Learn Center with important high competition terms. This is pulling up that 2% ratio to get to that level to be competitive and get overall visibility, not just for these articles, but other things that are linked on this section to give it more prominence and results net. Another component to this kind of ties into the 6 related link idea is just getting better logic. We sometimes saw clients who would just show the 3 most related links, or they may show links in that category, but they could be a random podcast from 2 years ago or a sales article that's not relevant at all. And it's just super important for those links to be hyper relevant to the article that they are on. So some CMSs make this easier than others, but when we were on CMSs that did not, we wanted to help with overall logic for that section. We essentially helped build a topic silo by creating a logic structure such as this, where we go through all SEO articles and give it what we call a primary tag. So you could just say it's SEO. You might want to give an article SEO as a tag, but you could give it a primary tag or your version of primary, and essentially have the logic state say, we will start and surface primary tags first, and then all primary tags plus additional tags in that same category. So if I have blog posts on lead generation, I'm going to look for primary tag blog posts that also are tag lead generation, and then randomly show those. And if I do that and have that general structure across all of our core categories, and I've thoughtfully kind of planned those out, we end up with a web like the right, where we're getting that SaaS article version that we saw on the Siege website, because we'll now see all primary SaaS articles on Siege very clearly highlighted via that structure. And that can be scalably implemented where you don't have to manually do everything. And if you feel like there's manual breakdowns in how articles are selected and what have you, this is a pretty good solution. And AIs can make this even more powerful and easy to do today. So I'd encourage looking at those kinds of things in your logic. This may even be a rudimentary version of this, but in generally, is something to look at, is how are we selecting those articles, the 6+. We should be pretty thoughtful about that if we want to see results on our websites. NerdWallet is a great example of this. I think if you look at any of our articles, they have highly targeted related links. This is driving time on site, performance. They also have a good example of using a thumbnail, but then not using a thumbnail still looks nice. They also have other related links. This brings them above that 6+ link threshold. Not a shocker that they perform quite well also. Keyword research, kind of tying into content strategy in some way. Keyword frameworks are something we've evolved to over time. We've had clients, even though this is a dated screenshot of Google Analytics, actually drive 200K in pipeline from only 200 or so visits over 6+ months. And that's because it was a versus article of them versus a competitor. And because they had a high customer lifetime value, this was a very lucrative term that's worth going after, even though you can't find data for this in Ahrefs or your tool of choice. So that matters. That's important. And what those are in our experience are these. So just to give you the Siege comparable, it might be link building cost, link building versus content marketing template. What is inbound marketing? Siege media versus X. Siege media alternatives. What is inbound marketing? Those examples, some of those will have search volume, but there will be examples that don't. And especially when you're going really bottom funnel, which is competitor versus you or competitor alternatives, those are the kind of examples that almost always are warranted if you have a high ticket price to build. And as an example on the left, how I would suggest validating it is go to Google Suggest, actually do that search and see if it shows up. And if that's not showing up in Ahrefs and the like, but it's showing up in Google Suggest, that's a pretty good indicator of someone searching it. And most importantly, that North Star should be, do you actually know this is the primary way people are comparing you to other people? And if you're hearing about competitors on sales calls, demos, transcripts, that's going to be helpful and will really make a difference over time. So that would be how I think about it. But generally, that idea of let's really nail those bottom funnel frameworks almost always, especially in high ticket markets, will make a ton of sense for just making sure we're driving real value over time. Similar to this idea is making sure we're doing keyword research the right way. So we had previously a thought process of you go to Ahrefs, you search for something like content marketing, and what you'll do is you end up finding very high difficulty terms that don't convert because anyone, the most basic SEO could understand, I'm Siege Media, I'm going to go there, I'm going to search content marketing, but I'm going to find all the high search volume things that anyone with a pulse would also see. But what they don't know is that many of those are not relevant to us and really top funnel at best. And if they had really gotten to know us, they'd find other routes that are more relevant overall and actually worth going after and converting and will convert and at much lower difficulties. And how you do that and how we suggest doing it generally is you spend a month or more than that really getting to know the business inside and out, listening to form submits, sales calls, or reading form submits rather, listening to sales calls, et cetera, And then go into a spreadsheet and just going through that user journey, searching for putting in keywords you think you would search as that buyer, or even asking your buyer what kind of searches they use to find you, and then validating with data at the end of that. And when you do that, you'll end up finding terms that actually are really longer tail and actually going to lead to conversion in some way. So an example for us that I don't think you could surface level understand unless you really got to know the business is we do work with a lot of bigger companies, and something like a WordPress versus Contentful, Webflow versus Contentful, those CMS comparisons are being done by big companies thinking about their content strategy before deploying it. And that often is the kind of company that we would work with. So we rank for those kind of topics. Hypothetically, that can be a high converting idea. That might be relatively high competition for additional reasons, but just that route of kind of really understanding how our customers think and progress through the journey would have led me to that term where I would bet a junior SEO would have never come up with that topic because they don't truly know the company and the business, and they just kind of did surface level content creation, content marketing, which could find you to something like how to write a blog post. That's actually a quite terrible term for us because those are all writers. Those are not buyers of content marketing services. That is not a good route. And that's how you end up on the top of this quote. Another change we've made more recently is looking at page one results to identify link intent. And we call this organic link score. So what this is doing is if you use Ahrefs, you can actually find and use their keyword difficulty tool to measure link intent. What it does is it averages the number of links to page one results and gives you the number of links to those. What we found is not the most ideal tool for overall keyword difficulty because it ignores domain level authority, and it also ignores optimization of that keyword. So we like key search for overall keyword difficulty. It's affordable, it can round out your strategy from a cost standpoint, not be that expensive. But then if you actually weight that difficulty against Ahrefs organic link score metric, which is really keyword difficulty, you get a better overall benchmark for link intent. And if you can combine these, you can end up going after low difficulty terms that can convert and rightly understand difficulty. Overall, a very big win, all things considered. Another change we've made is we use traffic value as a benchmark, what people are bidding on keywords to identify the potential ROI for our clients. The weakness of that is it doesn't adjust for company situations. So if you're a newer startup, you have a unique positioning, almost never is that traffic value one-to-one with what you can monetize. Hopefully more sometimes less, but it will often overstate that number. So in our situation, these are SEO content related keywords. Maybe we could be relevant for top funnel-ish, something around email signatures. I'm not sure. But at best, it's a low relevancy term. So might apply a 1 to that where we give more value, we multiply by the most relevant things like content marketing, link building, backlinks, services we truly obviously have. Those are hyper relevant to us. So those scores would be at the highest level. While email signature would be at the lowest, there's no way we're monetizing it to $155K a month. You could also divide by this number. It's really your preference of how you want it to go and look. But I do think it directionally makes sense and is a helpful sense for what's possible, and adjusting that to more realistic numbers makes your overall content strategy better for prioritization. We call this keyword opposition benefit score. I originally got this idea from Todd Malcote. It essentially will look at that traffic value or cost for the number one ranking topic like us. You divide that by the difficulty, and then you multiply that by that relevancy. You now have a ranking equation to prioritize your topics accordingly. That can be quite helpful for making sure you're going after the right things and not going after a super high difficulty thing that's not going to drive a lot of value for you. So refresh frequency is also something that's gotten more and more important as things get more competitive. We're updating content more often. We want to make sure we're doing it the right way. So we have a tool that will automatically scrape the search result, create an average, and then recommend how often we should update content based on the average timestamps present on that search result. So if we have a topic such as a best AI tool topic, that's probably turning over almost monthly. potentially quarterly, but probably monthly. But then you go to something like gardening, that's probably annually or less than that. So you probably don't need to update that as frequently to stay competitive on the search result, where users are not looking for as much freshness to believe that is accurate. So we build this into our roadmap, adjust the scoring accordingly, and we create more relevancy. An additional point that you might be picking up on from this graph is when we're scraping these results, we look at how often dates are shown. If we don't see a lot of dates, that's probably a signal that there's tools present, landing pages present, and that relevancy will be important for making sure you can actually rank for these things. So it's an additional signal that you should look for as well, that we often found as an additional benefit is that it will essentially build on what was previously there and give you a more accurate depiction of whether or not you can rank for this thing, especially with a blog post if that's the route you're going to go. So that updated look essentially adds refresh frequency. If you're updating something 12 times a year, that's dramatically different in outcome versus one in terms of effort required. So we weight all these things, we get a really improved overall strategy and thought process. We're also looking at trend data now. We didn't do this previously, but essentially this is a quantitative plus qualitative look because you, at the end of the day, need to make a gut call on it. But you can kind of get a sense for how this topic has been trending and how you expect it to continue to trend. So to give you examples on multiple routes, AI topics are skyrocketing. I think I've actually seen some of those come back down a little bit. It's unrealistic that it would stay at where it was. Some will continue to build. It just depends on the kind of topic, but you want an expectation set around what the search demand you're going to have accordingly when picking those things. On how to promote your blog, this is a thing on surface level people would do, but now we all know most people are on social media. People are doing less promotion of a blog, unless maybe they're an SEO. So that audience is much smaller and may only continue to decline. Or maybe this is even more relevant to siege media. It depends on where you're at. But looking at that keyword data accordingly to understand, do I expect this to continue to accrue or decline, may make you prioritize that in your order a little bit differently. So that leads us to content creation and how we're starting to do that increasingly better and more improved over time. Our newer thought process here is making sure we're leveraging first-party data across all of our content to drive more outcomes. We call this product-led digital PR. And essentially that idea is to build a big trends report and then repurpose that data across the entire ecosystem. When we did that analysis, we found the lift was as significant from the articles that did not do that. So just to give you an example, there's a trends report on the left, and then we have a data asset from Zendesk. They leverage that on customer service statistics asset, also on a piece on customer experience, and et cetera, it can continue to be leveraged across more articles in that same way. We've done the exact same thing on Siege, where we have a trends report, and at the top of our content, such as this post on link building strategies, we reference the link building specific data point on that trends report as well. So that's the idea of first party product-led digital PR, is that we are building something strongly tied to product, build a report on it, and then repurpose it across all of our content to make that content more linkable, more defensible in the world of AI. That's kind of the newer insight we've continued to iterate on in 24, and we'll probably continue to move on in 25 and beyond. Another example of this is just that customer experience asset. Now we're sourcing that report, and that is another reference point of unique to Zendesk outcomes and thought processes that's going to make them more linkable, make these assets differentiated and more likely to perform as well. Another thing we've made changes on are being very data-driven on when we use images. You can now use Ahrefs API and probably could do that for a while, but they will show you when images are present on that search result. And that's a very data-driven insight as to when users demand images to improve the user experience of this topic. So if we do something on what is customer relationship management, users are asking for some images based on their clicking of the images tab. And because of that priority re-ranking, Google is going to surface more images in that result. The more they do that, the more likely it is users want images. And of course, there will often be reasons on top of that that you might want to add images. But at a very bare minimum, the data is showing, according to Moscast, in their limited sample, that 1 in 4 times at the time of this deck being built, images are warranted. So if we do that and we include images that frequently, and we decide on the posing side when not to include images with the data showing the reverse, we can be more efficient in our scoping and also make sure we always have what's required to rank when we pick a topic. Overall, I would suggest generally rounding up, we're sort of in the 33% of the time range. That's sort of our thinking. Using the data as it stands currently, we probably want to be above average, go where the puck is going, et cetera, et cetera. But this data is informing our decision making. Brian Dean is an amazing copywriter. I don't know how much of backlinko.com's content he's doing today, but he has a great style that we've mimicked in our intro strategy. We're calling it APPB, Tension Proof Preview Benefit. And that idea is to create a intro paragraph that hooks you and gets you into the content. It's essentially like a LinkedIn post on a blog post. Why can't we do that on a blog post as well? The title is the most important area, but of course the intro is very close to that. So the idea is get a really attention hooking first sentence. This post will show you how to scale your content marketing. It also gives you proof. They do 50 of these articles per month. They've published over 300 articles in the first half of the year. They know what they're talking about as it comes to scaling. That matters. The benefit is that they clearly state that lifted their revenue by 77%. Hey, I want to do this myself. I'm going to continue reading because of that. And then the preview is you're about to learn the step-by-step on how to do that. You kind of give a breakdown of what's to come. That's probably more likely to create attraction, especially if you got some cool stuff coming. That idea of bringing this all together where it is possible, it's going to be credibility building and get people into the article, drive time on site, drive conversion, and all those things we want. So this is our go-to copywriting formula to make sure we're writing a hard-hitting intro area. We've also looked at Best X roundups. These are high performance. We think this is impacting AI results as well, not just Best X software, but Best X anything. So we want to make sure we're ranking for these things. So when we create these articles for clients, some core themes we've seen across the highest performing of these is they'll have a what is section, but it'll be brief. It'll be small. I think generally it doesn't add a lot of value. I've never loved it, but currently the data shows it at least seems to be doing something. Another thing that I think is probably one of the most novel insights here is that best 4X. This is a nice refinement that gets people into their specific use case. So if we're on a link building software page, maybe we want to do mass outreach. Maybe we want to do digital PR. We want to get directly into the best tool for me. And by not making them read 10 results, we're more likely to do that. And that's probably going to drive more results net. And generally, as an insight, you can use our benchmarks on the right if you have these own pages to get a sense for what a good performance is. And if you're not there, maybe there's some room for improvement in the days to come. Another recent change is changing our Google Doc templates. What we found is you just use the default Arial 11-point font. That's not the best for actually mimicking the true experience you're going to have on the blog. The blog should ideally have 16 plus pixel font. It should be a tighter column width. And if you give writers the default state that's not their default state, they're probably not going to create more naturally readable content. Maybe they don't even have permission to upload to the CMS, which I don't recommend. But independent of that, it's good to operate in the same environment you're going to be in the CMS to be more likely to build engaging experiences. And it's not just about the words, it's about building a engaging out structure, and increasingly good marketing content is about that structure more than the words. And of course they all connect, but if you're not finding that structure, that's not a great thing. So it's quite easy to build a new template, put it into your Google Docs library in Google Docs and give it to all of your writers. This will make them default to a more scannable structure, and you'll probably see more performance overall from these defaults. On the distribution side, we've changed how we think. We used to do a lot of mid-tier outreach using guides, infographics, templates. We actually completely cut that out. There's just less mid-tier bloggers now. It kind of goes back to that how to promote your blog Google Trends slide I showed. And because of that, we're going to all data first. And the product-led digital PR is a big component of that as well. But in our data comparison at the beginning of 2024, we saw it just performed so much better. And because of that, we're going 100% data backed. That means running surveys, using tools like SurveyMonkey and the like for our clients, or using first-party data, even better if the client has that. That will contribute to these kind of numbers and only make them improve over time. Something else we've also done more of is we used to do a lot of statistics posts, but then we realized we should be sourcing more aggressively our own data. So it kind of ties to the previous slide, but if we can actually put our data at the top of these results, we'll find that could power the entire strategy. Because if you look at an example like this on a blog post, the IBM link, the Stanford link have thousands of links themselves. So essentially will be a citing section for our own compounding link strategy that otherwise is not as obvious. So if you can make all of it your own data, all the power to you, but more likely you got to include some of your data, some external data, and that will be really powerful for distribution of the content you have. And on that side, this kind of goes to the 2% link ratio thing. You want to highlight your content. It's not just about outreach. Really, you don't need as much of that if you truly can give visibility to your content in your site architecture and naturally have visibility through other channels. So ideally, you do have a Learn Center, but maybe you're also highlighting content below that Learn Center. You have featured content that pops, or other things in the footer as well. You have hubs that feature content that is important to you also. This will solve for a lot of that distribution that you thought you needed to do via cold outreach. So we're thinking about that more intuitively and deeply and aggressively, and talking about it accordingly to our clients to make sure we're driving the performance they want. So that's a big helping of it, but hopefully this was helpful. Definitely would love to hear any feedback or additional thoughts, questions you have in the comments on YouTube or wherever you may be seeing this. But yeah, I think things are optimistic. It's been 12 years at Siege, but I'm pretty sure we'll be back in 2020. Actually, let me update this on the fly here. This should be 2050 after 12 plus years, or really 13 years. I think we'll still be here. We'll still be doing SEO. It'll be a little different, but I think it'll be more similar than you think. But I appreciate everyone watching, and I look forward to your thoughts.